Good morning, Cecile here with La Petite Creme. We are live for episode number 2 of our Mom's Talk series. Can't wait to talk to you all. Hello, hello. I am going to add our co-host. Here we go. Hi, hello, welcome to our mom's chat. Hello, Varisa.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
We are waiting for a few more people to join us on
Sounds
this
good.
beautiful morning.
How's the weather there?
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, Florida in the winter is the best, as you know. So
yes, I would say, I'm for everyone on my. I've moved from Miami to New York, and this is our first winter back up north for like 12 years. And I always say that as it comes closer and closer to December, this is where the Miami, Florida people just start to glow, right? Because they know as we descend into a bit of the darkness and the cold, they're just blooming.
Exactly. We're really taking advantage of this time with no shame. We are.
We just saw some friends from who actually bought our apartment in Miami, and just talking about the view and the water and everything. We just you just don't get that anymore, anywhere else. Like it's people ask, like, do you have a view? I'm like, I like brick now. Like brick is good.
A few beach. We get tired of watching the beach.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah.
Hi everyone who's joining. Hello. We're super excited to have you. So while we are waiting a little longer, why don't you tell us, whoever is in here, if you're here about the picky eater topic, why don't you write in the comments, everybody, why do you consider your little one a picky eater? Like, what is it that makes you be here today? Like, what's the one thing or the couple of things that you think is like, oh, that's considered picky to me, and we'd be happy to dig more into that. And we have Fanny, who's going to join today, who she wasn't sure if she could join. So she's coming in now, if the system let us. So we'll see. Here we go. Hi, Fanny.
Hi.
Hey.
Sorry, I'm late.
Welcome. You didn't want to miss the party.
Yeah. That's an interesting topic for me, actually. I'm in a picky eater period for both of them. So
wonderful. We were just asking the audience. We have a lot of people who just joined what it is that make their little one picky. So we're waiting for a few comments.
If just to kind of throw in, as they're thinking about what makes their kid picky, I want them to also think about what kind of eater are you and your husband or your partner. I'm sorry. So just a little think about your kid, but also think about yourself. What kind of eater are you, and what kind of eater is your partner? What kind of eater are the other people who live in your household like? Because I think there's some relevance to that, and I'm going to throw that into that for later.
Yeah. Okay, so we already have a few comments. Somebody saying that they have a 7-year-old who only eats pasta and bread, and veggies, only soup, and no meat at all.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. We have people saying that, again, no vegetables seems to be a good one.
Yeah.
Plays with the food but doesn't eat really. Yeah, that was my daughter too. She loved to play with it, kind of like playing Lego with the food.
All done.
Mostly soup. Somebody is saying no, mostly soup. That's the only thing that goes down, soup.
I think soup is kind of awesome, actually. I'm going to throw that in. I think soup is actually a little bit of a gateway modality, just because you can put all kinds of things in soup.
That's
they're all kind of
interesting.
different
That's
textures,
interesting
you know?
because see, like some people see it as being an issue, or like to say,
Yeah.
okay, the only soup.
Yeah.
That we'll see what soup can bring to the table. And then whenever Fanny is back, she can also tell us what her issue with her little one. A few vegetables in there.
I'm curious, you know, when we had talked before, Cecile, you had kind of really wanted to start out with that question.
Yes.
Can you kind of go through like why you thought that was a good question to start out with? I thought that was an interesting response.
Well, it's also because I feel like there is two aspects to picky eating. It's the content of what the kid eat, but also the attitude toward the meal, right? Like, so as I was talking to other parents as we were preparing for this, it seems to be a mix of like, oh, they only eat this or that and not enough of this, or should be more of that. But also like the meal time in general is painful for the family, and sometimes it's linked together. So I'm wondering if
great question.
By the definition of picky eating, are we talking about mostly the content of the plate or the interaction with the food in general, which is kind of together, right? So that's why I wanted to kind of get back to the definition of picky eating, because as a professional, you probably see a lot more range of what people come to you and what do they generally come to you with. First of all, is it common for people to be complaining about having a picky eater? And also, what is it the complaint in general? Is it more towards what's in the plate or the attitude toward the food?
So I'm just going to bring in, for those who have joined and are not aware, you know, both Cecile and Fanny are from France. Yeah. And the French, you know, are really pretty exquisite when it comes to really spending time to be present, to think a little bit about this topic, because the thing that you're trying to distinguish is what you eat and how you eat it. It's they're actually two very different things. So the question becomes, I get this and this and this into my kid, but I literally am chasing them around the house to get it, right? Is that like a success or a fail? Like right? Because the food is, you know, theoretically in the stomach, like, don't I get points for that, right? Yeah, you totally get points for that, right? Like, you got the food into their stomach, right? But I will see, being in Miami, of course, I saw patients from everywhere, right? So particularly my French patients, it really became a question of how you eat. Yeah. You know, are you sitting at the table? You know, are you chewing your food? Mm-hmm. I have heard stories, sometimes horror stories, from adults who were like, my grandfather made me chew 100 times per bite. I think it's obviously a bit of an exaggeration, but the fact that there's even any kind of like rule, you know, or dialogue about chewing your food is like, the Americans are like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I don't even chew. Like, I mean, I'm eating in the car as I'm driving on the way to somewhere, you know, like, I don't think that the chewing, you know, really happened. I'm not sure what happened. Yeah. So I think that without realizing, you guys are kind of showing a little bit of your card, you know, the fact that you distinguish the two. Because I do think that, you know, if I sometimes interact with a French family, the what they got in was actually amazing, was great. But the 2-year-old wouldn't sit at the table for the whole meal. And they were like, this is terrible. I have a picky eater. And I was like, hold on, right? Yes, there are elements that behavior-wise, you know, but at the same time, what you got in was, you got carrots in, you got, you know, meat in, you got like some grains in, like, you actually did a great meal. And I think that the reason why I think this is not, I'm not there to distinguish it, but I think that you can actually improve both by looking at both. So what I would say sometimes is that I would see situations where the kid's willing to eat the food. For example, sometimes we're busy in American life, right? So we chase them around. We want to kind of eat, force, and they want to feed their kids quickly, right? The problem becomes that sometimes some kids are like, I don't want to be fed. Don't feed me. I want to feed myself. Yeah. And I literally had this very charming little boy who was a picky eater. Mom's picky eater. Mom is Jewish and the dad is French, and they were very like busy. Their life was really, really busy. And I said, you know, just out of curiosity, when you come, like when you guys go sit down to eat, does everyone sit with him? And they're like, no, we don't have time. Literally, we have the food, we try to feed him, we run, we do the laundry, but no one sits with him. And I said, you know, why don't we start sitting with him? Let's just humor me. And sure enough, this little boy was more French than anyone, right? Literally would only eat if everyone else sat with him, had their plate too, was eating too, and they were conversing. That's the only time that he would let any food touch his mouth. So it was kind of like a fascinating idea of like how, so we got him to eat a lot of diverse food by assessing the how as opposed to just the what.
That's interesting, because I feel like I remember my kid when she was 18 months old started to have that, oh, I don't want to eat anything, or at least that's what I was saying, because food was not an issue before, and all of a sudden they're like, no. And that's, as a parent, you're like, oh my goodness, I thought I had that thing figured out. Right. And now I'm kind of like going reverse. And I realized that if I offered 2 or 3 different food, meaning instead of putting the carrots and the cucumber together, I put 2 plates, be like, which one do you want? Then she'd be like, oh, I pick that one. And then that was the end of it, of like her expressing her control and will, of being like, oh, I'm going to pick. And sure enough, she ended up picking one of the 2. But the fact that she had control over that situation made us go through that phase, because I knew it wasn't something about the food itself, but more about her interaction with it. Like, do I get to pick? Right. And I think, what do you have now with you said the 2 of them, you would consider them as picky eater. What's your challenge?
Zoe is more like the quantity that she wants to eat. So maybe it's like an unfair fight, because maybe she doesn't need that much food. Yeah. But I always the impression that she got like not enough. So, but even for the thing that she likes, like for example pasta, she won't like ask for more. Like when she's done, she's done. So for things that she doesn't really like, I need to push until that I have the impression she had enough. But yeah, that's more the quantity for her. Yeah. And for Martin, more like, you know, the texture. I think he is like learning all of the different texture, taste, everything. So that's, for him, it's more like trying different things, and made him like eat and like, you know, right. And focus on the meal, and, you know, don't throw it all over the kitchen. That's more like, but that's the age. I think he's like at this age, or he's like discovering the food. And Zoe has always been a small eater, like even small baby, she was not like a big eater. So I don't know, it's me that wants her to eat more that she really needs. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I always kind of tell people, because, you know, we do start talking about food exploration, you know, around 6 months old, right? We start saying like the food starts to come in, but the milk is still more important until 9 months, right? So the 9th month is when we kind of cross over, where milk kind of takes a back seat and the food comes forward, right? So we talk a lot about, there's some thoughts of like baby led weaning and the idea of like touching their food and that kind of thing. But the idea is that I always tell people, and that's the reason why I have you pause when you have discussions or thoughts about, wow, my kid is picky. The first thing that I do is I pause and then say, well, how do you and your partner eat? Like, you know, who's around them? Both genetics and environment, right? Because some people, there are so many variations in eating style. You actually inherit that. Some people love to see big piles of food. Some people need everything to just like, they get overwhelmed. They want it to be small amounts, right? Some people eat a little bit, walk away for a little bit, eat a little bit. My oldest was notorious for that. Eat a little bit, walk away, play. You think they're done. You're about to clean up. come back, they're like, okay, they're eating a little bit. I mean, it was just the way that they ate. They just weren't all at once kind of big eaters. They're not like that even now. You know, it's not changed, you know? But I think the reason why I call it an arena is because it's one of the first places where what you come to the table with matters, right? So if you're kind of somebody, there are so many, like if you were someone that your parent forced you to eat a lot, you might come to the table and say, I don't want to do that to my kid, or fall right back into that pattern. Because we come with our own baggage. So this is the first place where we get to kind of get a look as to what's, for better for worse, triggering us, right? And what kind of like, you know, thought process comes in. And it's so fascinating because I know it sounds crazy, but control is a big deal. Control is a big deal. This is what you're bringing to your mouth, right? This is what you're eating, putting into your body. And you know, being able to follow your cues of satiety, meaning like how full you are, is actually something that we need people to still feel, right? And I think that when you are trained from a very young age to almost disregard that, like, oh, you're full, it doesn't matter, you got to still finish this. My mother was notorious. My parents have very strong accents still, but my mother, we would be at like McDonald's, like it's like just random. I mean, it was like the burger was like $1, like it was like, why? And you just get full, and she'd be like, no, you finish the meat. You know, she'd open up the table, you have to eat that. I don't even know what that was, like I don't know, but it's that kind of thing where like it didn't matter if I was full. It was just like, no, you have to finish this. And it's that kind of thing where it became a control thing where I almost don't remember being asked, hey, are you full? Oh, you're full? Okay, good. You can step away. Like that wasn't in my, it was like, I will determine how much you eat.
So we need to trust our kids on their own ability to say to us, I'm full.
I'm full.
That's
now, if they say I'm full and now I want more dessert, you know, that's different, right?
So if they are full for the veggie, you still allow a dessert. For me, it's kind of
no. And you may not even need a dessert, like because they're smart too. They're like, wow, if I say I'm full earlier, I get the dessert earlier. Yeah, you know, you're right. You know, but if it's more of a situation where like I'm actually full, and like kind of say, okay, then you can kind of step away for, you know, I think that it depends on what they got full on. Like say, like, you know, I think that's. I mean, I actually was really interesting. So I work with a nutritionist too, and I've worked with one, and she has this whole thing about like trying not to like glamorize sweets, and that they're almost like kind of like on the plate, right? And so it's like that control piece is there. I think that that's an interesting idea. I think that sometimes we underestimate how addictive sugar is, so I think that that's kind of tricky too, you know. Even for myself or for anyone, I think that, like, you know, you kind of alluded to this idea of like not allowing the sweet to show up until later in the day if possible, you know, just because it starts to turn on that cue. But I think that, you know, if we're going to talk about people and kids being picky, we do need to take just a moment to kind of understand that they live within an environment. And I think that we have genetics. I had one person that had written, you know, like, I eat everything, but my husband's picky, you know? And sometimes that might kind of like loom over our head and be like, oh my God, I don't want my kid to be like my husband, or, you know, but there's a little bit of that thought that we could change that. And I think that, you know, eating style is something that's hard to like change, you know, to shift. You kind of have to work with it. I think the thing that I really, really try to steer people away from is being afraid of mealtime, afraid of eating, afraid of food.
Yeah.
And we do a great job of that in our world of medicine. You know, we do a lot of talks about, oh my God, you know, all the allergies you can have, all the choking hazards. Like, we do a really good job of making everything very scary for everyone. So, you know, good for us. So the problem is that, you know, when children are kind of like, if you're hovering over that kid, oh my God, you know, there's a lot of that. How could mealtime be good? Like, how could eating be fun and enjoyable and expressive? And, you know, it just can't be. So sometimes we got to check ourselves and say, like, what are we carrying? And like, how do we interact with this kid? Because it's one of the first times where we do have to let go.
And that's a good point that you're bringing. You mentioned earlier that Fanny and I are from France, and France is kind of known for their like eating protocol and eating, you know, there is a lot of like French and food that goes together that is so like deep into who we are, but also what the exterior world think that we are. And it comes with a lot of pressure.
Yes.
Because in French culture, if your kid doesn't eat according to the standards, you get like seen as a bad parent. And I know I feel that from me. I'm sure a lot of people from the French community feel that. And it's also creating outside pressure to like, oh, my kid should be eating this, or my kid doesn't eat that. And a lot of it is also now in today's age become counterintuitive with what medicine now tell us, like, or science tell us, like, oh, lots of breads, they have to eat like a lot of milk, and they have to eat all of that stuff, and now it's kind of going against what you know the beliefs are. So it's also difficult. And now we're just talking from the French culture here, but I'm sure there are all the different culture for different people of like the pressure from the outside of like how your kids should be behaving and eating and doing around mealtime, because food is very deep into people. It's like a very strong belief system, right?
I mean, there's a lot of something called that we're starting to recognize as performative parenting. You know, it's kind of like, I think we've shifted from the concepts of helicopter parenting, and now we're actually calling it performative parenting, because now it's no longer that we're so focused on making sure that our kid is doing everything right. We're actually looking around to make sure that everyone's watching us do a great job. And that really gets funky, right? Because now you're not looking at seeing like, hey, well, what do you want to eat today? I mean, I think that your kid has a right to choose. Should I have celery today, or should I have, you know, carrots? Those are both good choices. And by being kind of like hearing her and saying, you know what, I think she just wants to kind of have a little bit of agency, right, in what she wants to eat today. It's a big deal. It's a huge deal. Now, the thing that I think gets a little funky, you know, so you know, you're not supposed to be looking at what would make you look like a good parent, right? You're looking at what makes sense for my kid. So the sooner you can drop that gaze where you're like, this is not about what everyone else says I should feed my kid. This is what I think my kid is like that, based on like who their parents are, like based on what the environment, this is how I think it will make sense to this kid, right? Now, I think that, you know, somebody had written, you know, in the comments, you know, we're only eating like breads, we're only eating like sugars, you know, we're not really eating like anything like alive, right? The thing that is tricky is that, you know, processed foods are addictive. They're made to be addictive. Unfortunately, frankly, I mean, we live in this world now, you know, and I think in many ways it kind of like caught us, because we were kind of in between, you know, age where we were kind of stuck in this place where everyone was running from like cooking all day. There's this whole thing of like, well, isn't this wonderful? I could just buy a box of something, and then I can buy a box of this, and I can buy a can of this, and I don't have to be in the kitchen all day. So it became kind of like this, like the more processed food you ate, like the richer you were, you know, the more modern you were, right? And then, you know, we hit a wall, right, where no one knows how to cook anymore, right? We don't really have, you know, we don't walk into the house. I had a mom, and you know, I had a pediatrician, like a developmental pediatrician, Chinese medical doctor. He's like, everyone talks about picky eaters, but like if no one is cooking, right, then it becomes a situation where you don't walk in and there's no smell in the air, right, of like food cooking, right? He's like hunger being open to other food is not just about like choosing one or the other. It's like you have to start to like smell something that smells good. Wow, that actually smells pretty good, you know? And then eventually, as you take little steps, that food is not as scary. And so what somebody had written in the comments, like, well, what do I do if they're only choosing those things? Absolutely. I mean, I think that that's the reality a lot of people have. I think that there might be a moment that you might want to think, you know, can I cook with my kids? Like, can my kids be in the kitchen with me, or like at the grocery store, like choosing the food? How do I bring them into that process? I'm a big fan of that, just because I feel like we live a very busy life, and I would almost prefer that they cook with you than they versus go to like 3 classes every day after school. Like I'm kind of a little old school like that. Like, how do we slow down time a little bit? Because, you know, cooking is actually a very important unwind for all of us. You know, we're touching things, you know, we're kind of like processing the day. There's a lot of things that happen with cooking that can be very good, actually.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, if you start to kind of unwind a lot of the tension and kind of the hurry, it might be interesting to see as you start to like have them taste. My kids are, I'm known for literally, they'll be doing their homework studiously, being so good, and I'm cooking, and I will literally come in with a spoon, right? And they'll be like, what is that? I'm like, just try it. Just and they know. They don't have a choice, and they're going to be trying it. And I mean, if that means with like a little kid that you let them like, oh, you want to try it? Let them put their, you know, take a little bit out, make sure it's not hot, and let them just touch it and eat it with their hand and kind of like taste it. And they kind of feel, oh, this is interesting. There's a chance, right? Touching it and like kind of experiencing it might start to kind of make those foods a little bit less attractive.
Yeah.
I love the soup because the soup is a great place to kind of mix in all kinds of things. So like, you know, if you can, you know, try to go savory. Bread and you know, sugars are coming in sugars, like as you would know them, but also like in carbohydrates, sugars. There is less sugars in fruit. I do think that, you know, fruit's a better option. Have I seen people over fruit in Miami? Yes, I've seen kids who are literally eating like 6 servings of fruit a day and nothing else. That's a lot. That's a lot of fruit. So I feel like sometimes that can take over. But as much as you can in the beginning of the day, go with your less sugary things, less savory things. If you're going to have like a bread or a cracker, try to spread something on that, whether that be peanut butter, you know, almond butter, and, you know, or even like a piece of cheese or 2, because a little bit of that fat will actually slow down the breakdown of the sugars. So they won't get as much of a high. The glycemic index actually changes. Sometimes they found that like if you've cooked rice and you leave it in the fridge and then you take it out and you heat it, that actually just makes it doesn't break down as fast. I know it sounds bizarre. Multi-grain products are good. Again, just trying to sneak a little bit of that protein in, so they're not getting that rush from the sugars.
So you're saying the fat associated with the grains is better than just the plain grains.
Yes.
That's good.
It doesn't shoot that sugar up so high and then kind of pull that craving.
Yeah.
You know, and so it kind of slows down that whole process so that, you know, the addictiveness, the craving for sugars is blunted. Not taken away, but it's blunted. Yeah, lentils are great because you're just trying to get those proteins in and just kind of like, you know, and it could be legumes in any way. Butter is not bad. I'm sorry, I'm gonna.
My friend. Of course,
I'm very French with that. Butter is not bad. You know?
Right there.
It's a fat. You know, it's a good fat. It's a beautiful one. So I just, you know, you just want to kind of make it so, and the less and less that you can have, and I know this is like a really tough role, the less processed stuff that you can have in the house. Okay, so it's not even like the better. It's so hard. I'm not a huge fan of the pouches because I think it takes out the what and the, you know, I know that there's kale in there, but there's also like mango and pineapple and you know there's like, you know, one vegetable for like 6 fruits, you know, so they kind of know what they're doing, you know. I'd rather your kid like literally like take a spoon and learn how to take soup, you know. I mean, I think that's really the squeezy things. I know that's easier and faster and maybe like in a pinch it works, but you know, I remember I was working and there's an abuela and she was like giving, you know, black beans, beautiful black bean soup to the kid while they were waiting waiting for me to come in. And so I said, oh, I guess, is that dinner? But she was, no, snack, you know? And, you know, in her mind, she was like, why does a snack need to be chips? Like, no, why does it have to be in a bag? Like, I just bought a little container. That's your snack. Like, soup is an incredible snack, you know? And I think that in many ways, we have a lot of kind of like old school tricks, I think, that they use, you know, to kind of get good, nutritious food in that, you know, makes a little bit more sense maybe for a younger kid. I don't know if you guys have seen it. My husband, whenever I say a story, my husband's first question is that, was that on TikTok? Did you get that from TikTok? Like he's always like, it somehow discredits like what I just said, but I'm just, I persist. I'm not ashamed. And so there's this thing going around on TikTok where this woman, she took like a play kitchen and she customized it so that like real water would come out, that, you know, the kids, it was a real fridge. And the kids in the morning, she trained them. They literally will like open, I mean, the kids are maybe like 1.5. I mean, like 2 maybe, you know, and they're coming out and they're literally opening up the fridge, and she gave them their own cups. And then she even gets like, you know, an apple slicer. And so that they can like apple slice. I mean, it was like, and this kid is like literally like, and she's like, you know, it started because I'm lazy. I don't like to get up in the morning, but also like when she started to see how much pride they had in doing their own kind of care, you know, and doing that work for them, it really was aligned with a lot of kind of this kind of Montessori idea of like that ownership. You know, you do chores. If you live on a farm, even in the US, I mean, you do chores from the minute that you can start to walk. You know, we got you working. And they've actually found with, you know, ADD, which is like, you know, the thing that we talk about, one of the greatest like therapies, kids who actually do chores as a young kid had better outcomes with attention issues. So the first way that we used to learn how to do things and monitor our attention was actually through chores.
Yeah.
So this whole food discussion, this whole eating, this whole ownership, you know, we have a whole generation of kids who are older who have a lot of anxiety, and we're not sure where did it come from, why are they like this. And there's some thoughts as they're looking back and saying maybe it was from a lot of this helicoptering and literally like having our kids and pulling the rug out from underneath them and be like, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. You're not able to do that. I'm going to do it for you. I'll do it better for you. You know, what's the long game? They're out of your house very soon. So somewhere along the way, they got to be able to know that they can do it. You know, it's terrifying if you're like, okay, I'm supposed to go through that door, but I don't know anything. I don't know how to do anything. And, you know, we did that. Like, you know, we've created that monster. You know, we've created that space. How do we undo that? How, you know, now with kids, you know, Fanny's kids' age, right? How do we kind of like start to give whatever we can back to them so that they have ownership over it again, right?
So you're saying that for parents who are like deep into it right now, and they're like, oh, that's my main struggle, you would encourage them to look at more of the long-term thing and see that as an opportunity to just give them the keys to kind of get out of it. But no, I wouldn't say by themselves, but like to kind of untie that because it might be reflecting of other challenges forward.
Yes.
That the issue is not actually right there, but it's more around it.
Well,
and it's bigger than what it is.
It's the first moment where we get to see how we are, right? So if you're somebody who's like, no, eat that, one more bite, come on, please. I had a friend, I love her, and she's a pediatrician, and we'd sit down to eat, and I think her kids were like 4, you know, and she would start singing, and she would be like, you know, red is good, green is bad, or like and we're like, what are you doing? Like, what? And she goes, I have to sing or they won't eat. If I don't sing, they won't eat. And I'm like, that's not normal. Like that, you should. Why are you doing that? And it was the kind of thing where, you know, she had gotten so terrified, you know, and it became a situation where she didn't know how to interact with her kids, besides in this like kind of like idea of like, I'll sing or like how about that bite? How about that bite? What about one more? You know, this is not fun. I mean, I do that to my kids now, and I hate it. Like when I get into that, I've been trying to like undo that because they literally shut down. We're not interacting at that point. So I would love to use the food conversation as a tool to be like, you know, how can we use this arena as a place where food is positive? Food teaches you about, you know, satiety. It teaches you about control, right? This idea of what you're putting into your body, you're going to take ownership over it. It teaches you how, you know, chores and like how to clean up after yourself and to be a part of the family unit. These are all things. I didn't just make this up. I mean, you read books and, you know, again, I'm just gazing as an outsider of like the French school system. You know, lunchtime, they consider lunchtime as like a classroom experience. It's a learning experience. And they really expect kids to emerge from their education system with a clear understanding of like, to eat well is a responsibility. And that is crazy for Americans, right? Because we talk a lot about like, how do I make my child eat better, right? And I feel like the French are more like, how do we teach our kids to take responsibility for how they eat? It's very different.
That's a good look. Like, Fanny, do you feel like it is like that too? Like, does that resonate with you?
Me, I really try to teach Zoe to understand which food she can prioritize beside others, like especially for sugar, because she's like very, very sugar, which
Yes.
is normal, like everybody. And since she eats sugar, she wants more sugar.
Yes.
So I really try to make her understand that she can have sugar, but
Yes.
it's the whole thing in a meal. Like, she has to have a little bit of everything. That's what I try to, and I try to teach her like what is the protein, what is the veggie, what is the grain, and for her to know from the very beginning that she has to have a little bit of everything to constitute a meal.
Yeah.
And yes, she can have sugar, but sugar needs to be like dessert or like a little, you know, treat.
Yeah.
That's more. I really try to make her understand that from the beginning, for her to learn and grow with this idea that sugar is not evil. She can have sugar.
Right.
Needs to stay a treat, like, and eat a little bit of everything.
Well, scientifically, actually, you know, I was at this conference and it was talking about glycemic index, and like they're talking about, you know, wheat and kind of like carbohydrates. And between a Snickers bar, you know, the Snickers bar has like nuts in it, right? Has caramel, right? Chocolate on it, right? And like wheat bread, right? Just a piece of wheat bread. The higher glycemic index is with the wheat bread.
Yeah, some kind of bread are very, very
by itself, right?
Yeah.
And so, again, the French are brilliant, right? Because they take the baguette and they put a huge slab of butter, right? And I mean, what I don't see that much, I don't see a lot of like, I don't see a lot of the French taking only like the sugar, where it's like a sugar bomb, where all it is sugar. They tend to kind of like throw in a little bit of protein with that, a fat.
Yes.
And it's a little bit of a trick so that that sugar doesn't punch so hard. When you get that glycemic index and it gets thrown up, you know, what happens is the insulin tries to match it, right? So the insulin's like, okay, I got to get rid of this. The problem is that it gets metabolized and you're not continually eating it. So the insulin's still high. So the insulin's like, come on, more sugar, right?
Yeah,
you know, it's open, come on in. And so the whole name of the game, I am notorious, but if I eat something really sweet, I can feel the sugar. Like, I have diabetes in my family. So I always tell you, I can feel the sugar before I can taste it. Like, literally, I'm like, whoa, like I just got like an injection or something. I will literally like grab a handful of nuts and be like, just trying to like get my sugar almost back down. So I think that's, in some ways, I think the thing that's interesting about what that nutritionist was saying, you know, she was like, yes, if you have like some kind of dessert and it's on the table, right? Not such a horrible thing if you eat something sweet and you go back to the savory, right? You go back and forth to the savory. Not so bad. It kind of balances each other out if you can run it. What's not great is honestly if you put everything, obviously, and the kid doesn't eat anything else but the sugar, then you've kind of defeated the purpose, right? But I think there's something to be said about this whole idea. If you're good, I'm going to give you sugar. This is tricky, right? And this is why we get a little bit of a problem, you know, sometimes in school. Oh, you were so good today, I'm going to give you a lollipop. Okay, I understand the Pavlovian idea, right? I know, I got it. I understand what you're trying to do with my kid. I got it. but I hate this idea where, you know, sugar, frankly, if I eat too much sugar, I feel like kind of sick. I feel probably as sick as if I was hungover sometimes, you know, like it's the same. It doesn't, I don't feel that good. So here I am, like almost having this psychological attachment to something that probably doesn't always make me feel so good. And that's a whole other weave, right? That's all.
Yeah, that
you
you
know?
bring up a good point, because I mean, we're parents, we're trying really hard to do good at home in the environment that we kind of control to some extent.
Yeah.
But then there is more, as the kids get older and older, there is
yeah.
more time that they spend outside of home. And whether it's daycare, whether it's preschool, whether it's school, friends, relatives, like they get out, and it's sometimes difficult to continue on that path of whether it is, you know, making suggestion, giving them control, including them into cooking, or like teaching them the good, you know, having everything into one plate. So how can one do to cope with that? Like, is it a lost battle to start with, or
I like to think not. I mean, I'm hearing more and more schools, you know, unfortunately more a magnet, and like, you know, smaller schools, or like, you know, more like private schools, unfortunately, make conversations about food. You know, no one's really brought it to the level of the French government, you know, like the French schools, you know, the public schools are definitely not like that. I think that you can just it's always worth it. You know, I think that what you learn at home is, you know, just as important as what you learn in school. So I would never give that up. You know, I think it's hard because, you know, I think that what I would love is for people to become more and more involved in the conversation, so that we can make schools better, you know, kind of enact that space. But I think in many ways, we culturally live a fast life. You know, I have, you know, moms, and I have conversations, and I know the conversation about cooking is a hard one because it is time consuming and it does require you to learn. I think soup is a great thing to learn, right? You just throw a bunch of stuff in the pot, you know, and it generally turns out pretty good, actually. So I think that's not bad to start with. I know I taught myself how to cook later in time, and so that's why it became such a powerful thing for me. My mom cooked every night, but she also was like the worst teacher ever. So she really never had any intention of teaching me how to cook. And I was of that generation. She'd rather me study than help her in the kitchen. I would have preferred probably to like help her in the kitchen, but you know, she just didn't want to have it, you know. And in many ways, I'm part of that generation that literally had to rediscover ourselves. And so, you know, my husband was the main cook for like a good portion of our life, about 10 years. And then after that, I kind of realized, I'm like, I speak so passionately about food, but yeah, I can't cook. Like, I felt like there was a disconnect, you know? And so I literally, and I mean, my kids can attest to it. I mean, they were like, oh my God, I would be like, tonight is German. You know, that would be like 5 like dishes of German. Like, tomorrow is Nigerian.
Cooking,
you know?
I mean, so cooking is intimidating, but I think people also make a big deal out of it when cooking can be as easy as putting, you know, eggs in a pan. It doesn't have to be this very elaborate. Cooking is just the fact of transforming something raw, or like getting something out of the fridge to make it into something that's consumable. So for example, my house, we do a ton of salads, and we're lucky we live in Florida. We don't necessarily need a ton of like warm food, but making a salad is super interactive. Everybody can pick what they want in it. It's had a wide range of flavors to it, because you can add like sweet, salty, fat, whatever. And that's cooking, because you get something on the table that has intent and thought into it. So we shouldn't, I don't know, I feel like it can be intimidating to cook. It's not really cooking as I'm running a restaurant. It's, you know, the intent of bringing something on the table that is not microwaved or just open a pack, right? Transforming raw ingredient into something that can be eaten is more than cooking, I would think.
Yeah, it doesn't have to necessarily be a hot food.
No,
you know, it's the idea.
It doesn't have to be something super intricate that cook for 5 hours, right?
I
something that goes like in a pan.
I definitely came out of, I mean, you know, I still try to do things here and there, but to me, I think what was really joyful was that you know, my son Andre was kind of a kid who was, not really finding his space. He was a decent student, like AB, but like, kind of that kid that would fidget a lot, kind of move around a lot, would play video games, kind of like your typical kid at the elementary school age. And then somewhere along the way, I had this like cooking epiphany. So I was like, fine, you will be my sous chef, and so I would grab him from whatever he was doing. And I'm like, okay, saute that, and just shake it around. And in the beginning, he was, I can't, it's hot. I don't know what. And I was like, no, just, and each time we would kind of get a little closer to it. So I was learning at the same time as he was, right? And I know that it sounds crazy, but just that act of being in the kitchen, paying attention, aligning his physical movements to his attention, he started becoming like a straight A student. Like he did much better in school, which was like wacky, right? Because I didn't really realize how much, again, this chore, right, that we had taken for granted, right, was probably a really helpful way for him to learn how to work with his body and then work with his expectations and judge things and work with a little bit of his instinct, And I always give credit to cooking. So for me, I feel like we have this, I always tell parents, like the answer is usually right in front of us. And I think that the thing that I think is hard is that we always feel like everything is like stuck. Like, well, we have to do it this way, or we have to do it at this time. And in many ways, I'm always like, start basic. Like, even if it means that everyone just sits down for like 5 minutes together, right? And just grab something to eat. Start there, right? Even just the act of it, right? And then maybe start cooking or start, but it's the kind of thing where you don't have to feel like you do everything at once, right? Whereas I have to have these amazing gourmet meals like every night, all at once. Like, you're never going to do it. It's just too intimidating. It just doesn't way that it works.
Can we also throw in that to try to stay away from the norm? So what is the norm, and what is, for you as a professional, what is out of boundaries? Like, when should parent be like, oh, well, that's really a problem, now I have to seek help? Or now, compared to what is just within the range of a very wide area of options around mealtime and food and kids and picky eaters?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there's a couple elements that I think need to be watched. One is growth. We are having growth issues. Probably need to have a really deep conversation with some follow-ups, right? Following their growth and following their intake, right? So now it becomes not really like, I would say, a style, right? But it becomes a substantive problem that they literally are not growing, right? And I'll be honest with you, when I see kids who are only eating carbohydrates and sugars, growth gets funky. The protein is needed, especially as you start inching into like 6 years old, 7 years old. Girls get their period sometimes at night. I know that sounds crazy, right? My point is that puberty is right around the corner, right? So that's a heavy growth period. Toddlers who are literally like running up and down everywhere, if they're not getting any protein, right? The burning, they just burn it all up, So, a lot of times, whether it be legumes or like fats, like a nut butter, like I'm just always like kind of like, try to get those in, at least in the morning. I had some kids that I was like a spoonful of almond butter was their breakfast. There's nothing pretty about that. There's nothing elegant about that, but at least it gets that protein hit, and then at least I feel like something is just starting to go, after school, they're starving. Don't grab snacks. Like, literally either take them home or I would pick up my kids. We would go to do like a diner, and I would be like, okay, here's some soup. That's what you have when you, almost like a little meal, because my timing is everything. Yeah. Don't give them a big glass of juice, or, I'm not a big fan of juice in general, right? Because it's all sugar, but don't give them a big drink, even a big glass of water, don't give that right before you're about to eat, right? Because it's that kind of thing where their stomach, there's only so much that I always say there's two reasons to be picky. One is if they're full, right? So they just kind of, you already filled them all up. Or two, if they're addicted, there's a lot of sugars are showing up without the fats, kind of like pulling them all day. And so they have a hard time always being able to kind of resist more sugar. Try it yourself. Eat like a whole, honestly, if I eat like something really sugary in the morning, you'll see the whole day, you're like, I just want more. Like you just physically can't see anything else. It's just the way that sugars are these days for us. But in many ways, I think that you have to start somewhere, you have to start somewhere to kind of, so if growth is really bad, I think that if there's an element where there is just an incredible amount of fear around food, where the kid is literally like screaming, yelling, tantrums, like really, really like hitting people because they're not getting the food they want. A lot of that behavior, and I know this is the part that I might get some flack for, but I mean, when you are having a kid that has a lot of sugar in their day and you start to decrease it, you kind of have to treat it like an addiction. Which means that there is like frank withdrawal, where sometimes where they're actually, it makes them like really kind of like aggressive. And they go through like frank withdrawal. And I had a mom, she was like, no, my kid's not addicted to the cookies, because she was saying it. And I said, okay, fine, whatever, but just put them up on the cupboard, hide them, and then I'll see you in a month. I saw her in a month and she was like, oh, so sad. And I was like, what happened? And she goes, she put the cookies up on the cupboard. She came in to find her 3-year-old climbing the shelves, right? Like, trying to climb, and literally would rather risk his life, to get it, and it was that idea that I was like, I don't think that people realize like that stuff's real. That withdrawal is, it hurts. It's painful. So I think that I mean, it sounds great. Like obviously I'm exaggerating, but like I did not realize that like being in pediatrics would be similar to being in a drug rehab. Like I was like, I have had to detox so many kids, from sugar, and I was like, would I be good at rehab? I mean, like, what happened here?
But it is real. It is real. Like it's really something. Again, also when you start getting your kid out of your house, the addiction is also like all those drugs are also coming back into their life, into their system. So the more you can. I remember you as my pediatrician, because I don't know if everybody here knows, but you used to be the pediatrician for my kids and Fanny's kids when you were in Miami. You mentioned that if you manage at home to put everything that they would eat outside, so it's everything that you mentioned one day, like if you can be as strong as being no carbs and no sugar, that's golden, because they would, whenever they step out of your house, the one thing they're going to eat for sure is either carbs or processed food or sugar. So they're not going to have a lack of that in their life. And I took that with me and I was like, damn, like it's if we want to make a balance, we have to take into account what they eat outside of the house. And what they eat outside of the house is all the easily accessible stuff and the sugar and stuff. So to add a balance means to be almost too extreme at home, like on the again, no sugar at all, you're going to get that outside. So it's a hard balance to keep up.
It's really hard. It's really hard. And I think that, I just, it's just kind of like it's just the reality of the fact that, we just don't always live in a society that kind of supports this kind of eating mindfully at home, being able to like chew your food and being in a space, and I think that that's a little bit of something that it's just the reality of it. And like, you may go extreme in the beginning just to kind of detox everyone, but in the end, and you can maybe bring in a little bit here and there, but I think that, sometimes, if you can, understand that you're kind of, you are, fighting a little bit of a societal space, that isn't going to be the most supportive on many levels, because again, we value convenience more, right? I would rather, many people are spending after school running around to 2 or 3 different activities every afternoon after school. And I mean, that's not where, when is the cooking happening? And like what kind of snacks can we bring? I mean, it's a really tricky thing. I've had, in Thailand, and I don't know if I've seen this in France, but my father, my uncle actually would have like like these metal dishes that were all stacked up on one each other, and like bring that, like if we were like on a road trip or something, and sure enough you would sit down, whereas like maybe in American culture we'd have like like chips or like some kind of like like crackers or some kind of bar, and literally he would like set out, and you'd have like a little meal like right there like at 3 o'clock, and it was that kind of thing where like we've kind of subscribed to this whole idea of like convenience. We're a part of it too. I would have parents and they were like, well, I don't really eat a lot of meals, I do a lot of smoothies and whatnot, and it's like, then why are you surprised that your kid, like, why are you shocked that your kid won't sit down for a meal, right? That your kid literally wants all the, in their mind, like, I'm gonna pouch while you take that smoothie. Like, we're all like, like that's our meal time together, And I think that, sometimes we just need to like take a moment and, if our kid is growing and, we are relatively healthy and we realize that we aren't home at a great time to be able to do this and that, be very, give yourself a little bit of grace. See, like, okay, maybe one meal a week, I'm going to cook that, or I'm going to like, this one time of day, I'm going to do this. And it has to start small because it's not fair. We can't do it all at once. Maybe instead of giving like a bag of chips and assuming my kid can eat nuts outside of the school, right? I think the nuts are much better. It doesn't give you that high, and they're really hungry because usually meal times are terrible at schools, and so like they're running around. Most of the kids are not eating. If they are eating, I don't even know what they're eating, like it's a mess. So let's assume that they're really vulnerable at 3 o'clock, like when you pick them up from school, that's the time to get some good food in because they're starving, and use those opportunities to kind of broaden their palate a bit because they're so hungry, use that in your favor. my son,
for sure. And really, that's a good point, like bringing, maybe listen to their cue of like, I'm hungry now, and even if it's again, we're going to talk with the French filter that we have, because at 4 o'clock for French people, it's sweet. Like you get an afternoon 4 o'clock snack. But maybe you could have a meal at that time, and it's okay. It doesn't comply with the French way of doing things, but it might be more fulfilling in giving more things to your kid. And worst case scenario, they're not going to have that memory of the afternoon snack, but they can have a memory of the morning snack, of another type of snack.
I'm going to defend the French again, because that's, I just came from Paris. Literally, yes, we did participate. I don't know why. 3 o'clock. I was like, I think it's time for an eclair. Like literally, I was like, I think I need an eclair. Do I do that here? No, I don't randomly need an eclair at 3 o'clock. But all of a sudden, I'm like, everyone seems to be getting, and I mean, even an eclair, right? There's cream in it, right? So it's not all sugar. And I was perfectly happy. And I will tell you, as usual, I went to Paris, ate like everybody else, and I literally lost weight. Like, I'm like, you know what this country, like, I feel like, the idea is that I would take an eclair. I know that sounds crazy. I would take an eclair over a bag of crackers any day. Any day.
That's a very good point, and I think that's a great takeaway from today. It's not fear the sugar, but add the protein or the fat to it.
Just throw it in there.
Because instead, it's easier to add to something than removing, especially for the kids. Like, oh, you want bread? Sure, you can have bread. I'm going to put butter on top. And I feel like as a parent, that makes me feel like I don't have to fight to say no to the bread.
Right.
I like that.
Right. I think that is a very doable, right? A little bit of a doable segue, right? To kind of like, helping the satiety, right? Not giving the sugar high, having boundaries, but yet still allowing some of it to be there. I think those are all ways to kind of work within what you have, And honestly, like, if you have like a spouse or like or yourself and you're a little bit of pickiness, right? Like, use this opportunity to be like, how do I get a little unpicky? What would work for me, right? And I think I love using children and your experiences with children to better yourself, right? To kind of heal whatever kind of weirdness that you might have with
Yeah.
stuff, right? And you're right. Some people just don't like this or they don't like this. They have every right. You don't have to like everything in the world, but you have to be willing to try it, right? You have to be willing to try it. And maybe once you learn how to cook, you're like, well, maybe if I made it with this, oh, that would actually taste a little bit better. So that's where the using the cooking and the tools, I think, gives you a little bit of an open door.
Okay. Well, we'll wrap up on that. It's been an hour. It's been a pleasure. I don't know if anybody in the comments or who's here watching got some valuable information from this topic. It was a pleasure to see you ladies, and we'll talk again in 2 weeks for other topics which we haven't determined yet. Thank you very much, Varisa. It was fantastic having you, and thank you for your valuable insight as always. Fanny, have a good one. Good luck with your little one.
Right.
And happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Yeah.
I'm on the
Bye.
topics.